Welcome to Kev's Travel Stories. Each week I'll be bringing you a story from the weird and wonderful world of travel, a world that can change the way you see life and love and even the way we find meaning. Places that are iconic and sometimes surprising and even terrifying. So sit back and enjoy while we go on a magical mystery tour together. Welcome to Kevin's Travel Stories, and this week we have a rather scary one. Boom, 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 bum, 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 bum. That was my rather pathetic attempt to recreate the soundscape that the great John Williams masterminded for the mega hit Steven Spielberg's Jaws. And who can forget the opening? Who can forget the fixation with this beast that you had to wait many, many minutes into the movie to get a glimpse of? I don't think anybody left that movie, one of the great iconic movies of the last century, without fear and a fascination for the great white shark, this sort of bogeyman, which was very possibly incorrectly attributed with fear and loathing in the sea, because it's just going about its business like we all are, actually, isn't that so? Anyway, I had the opportunity when visiting South Africa recently to actually come face to face with a great white shark. Did I take the opportunity? Of course I did. I couldn't let down my wonderful legion of podcast listeners to the top travel destinations without taking risks to life and limb. And so it was that I made my way to Hermanus and found myself getting up at the crack of dawn, actually before dawn, wending my way to nearby Gansabay, and this is where several operators have their cage shark offerings. They're all rather sort of glitzy and glary. You get pictures of a man cowering with his girl in a cage while a great white opens its huge mouth to devour one. Like all things in life, it's not quite like that. So I'm going to take you on my trip, and I'm going to bring you face to face with the great white that I met. I just want to add that you can go on these trips out from the Gansbaai township out to the bay where the sharks gather and never see a great white. The man who was navigating our boat warned us that this was a possibility. And as soon as I donned my neoprene wetsuit, because it is cold down there, this was in January, it's cold, it's wet, I actually got really seasick in the half-hour trip out. So it's not the most comfortable experience. You're shivering, you get into a cage that's lowered over the deck of this small little tug. They toss chum into the water, which is an undescribable mixture of offal and blood. This, because the great white has sensory equipment that can smell one particle of blood in an ocean miles away, it drags the great white. Now, the great whites are already there because there is a sea colony just on the other side of the bay, and this sea colony drags the great white up on its instinct. It travels up from Australia at this time of the year to feed on the pups and the other prey in the waters of the Gansbaai area. Seals, fish. Dwyer Island is where this large colony of Cape fur seals, making this an ideal hunting ground for the great white. And there's this extraordinary combination of warm waters from the Indian Ocean and the cool waters of the Atlantic give this nutrient-rich environment which supports this ecosphere and attracts the great white. Now, I didn't find any warm water there as I gripped hold of my ice-cold steel cage and prepared to duck. I was feeling anything but warm and very, very queasy. You don your neoprene suit, your diving suit, you have a mask, and you're up to your neck in this cold water. This is what happens. The man on this little tug is perched high up in a sort of a bird's nest, right at the top of the mainstay of the ships, looking out. The man below throws a tuna head on a piece of rope. It's not very technologically advanced, I'd have to say. He chucks this out, and the lookout says, "Okay, I see a fin. Duck!" Okay, this is our cue to put our heads under the water and to go down on our haunches in this little steel cage that's no bigger than 10 foot by 4 foot. And we gaze out into the murk. What did I see? I looked left, I looked right. There was a sort of a pounding of the heart in the chest. You could hear cries from above that a great white had been seen. I'm afraid to say that in 2017, an experienced diver was in a cage in Australia, and the shark actually got through the cage and killed him. So there is a danger in this. This was possibly preying on my mind as I held on to that one breath, that's all I had, and gazed out. And then, out of the murk, it came! Oh my goodness me! It was huge! I would say 15 meters, and it came right towards us. It saw the tuna head sinking, but it veered away from that and came straight towards our cage. And then at the very last second, maybe with 3 or 4 meters away, this huge, beautiful sea monster, unfairly described, I believe, turned and gave me a dead-eyed look. Now, I am not kidding you. The great white has such a sensitive antennae that steel and iron immediately repels it. So it would be like touching an electric shock. So when it verged away, it couldn't come any closer. It doesn't want to be near metal. It's not something that's in its sphere of comfort. But it did see me. I'm sure of that, and it turned away. And what I noticed is its huge grey flank. Literally, I could have put out my arm and touched it. That wouldn't have been a wise thing to do. So I didn't. But as it moved away, I saw all of these scars, like bits that were taken out of this tough grey hide. So I presume this was a male. I presume he was quite old. I presume he'd had what all males seem to do in the wild and the not so wild, is fight over their mating rights. And off he went with a twitch of his tail into the murk and was seen no more. Well, we all came up out of the water, took a huge lungful of breath. Oh my goodness me, there were cheers on deck. We looked at each other. There was a New Zealand girl to my right and an Australian guy to my left. We high-fived. It was a sudden moment after this elation, fueled by adrenaline, because we had come literally face to face 3 or 4 meters away from one of the most efficient predators, who would, without any shadow of a doubt, have ripped us to pieces, because we would be fair game. We would be food. We would be prey for this animal. So what are we doing there in the South Atlantic Ocean, just off the beautiful town of Hermanus, where the great whales gather? What were we doing right out at dawn as the sun filtered through the clouds in the cold of a January South African morning? There's a whole issue around, is this a good thing to do? Because what you're basically doing is interfering with nature. The sharks come up to feed not on chum or on tuna heads that are thrown out on a bit of old rope. They come up to eat the seals and the fur seals on the island. But we've gone in and we have interfered with this. Now, I have to say that I did my research because we want to be environmentally aware when we're traveling. Before I brought this story to you, I wanted to be sure that I was not on dodgy ground. I contacted the Department of Environment and Water, and they have done research. There is quite a lot of research actually in South Africa on the efficacy of shark cave diving. And the conclusion, according to the research, which you can find online, it does not interfere with the habitat, it does not interfere with the seasonal passage of the sharks or of the seals. They have done a lot of research with 2 providers of shark cage diving, Rodney Fox Shark Expeditions and Calypso Star Charters, which are probably very good people to do a shark dive with if you so wish, because they provide data and logistical support to the university in South Africa that does this research. So I suppose one could say hand on heart that you are not supporting something that is in any way environmentally dodgy. I still have a slight question mark because the main thing that got me was how cold and how sick I felt on the trip. If you are going to go down to this part of South Africa, go to Hermanus, which is on the garden route, it's right at the base, it's a place of wonderful beauty. The natural world around there will captivate you. If you do elect to go on a shark cage dive, it's about a 30-minute drive out. You go in the early morning out from Hermanus. You get to the bay. You can book online beforehand, which I think is a very good idea to do. It's not that expensive. Check online. You will get quite a lot out of it. My bit of local advice would be take some seasick tablets the night before. Be careful not to eat too much on the morning. You are up at 3-4 a.m. in order to get out to the boat, and then there's a half hour on the tug to get right into the channel where they start chumming the waters. This is between the land and the seal island. So I would dress well and be prepared for a bumpy ride. But going back to the actual moment of meeting the great white, well, that wasn't the first. When I came up, the gentleman who was spying from the tower at the very top of the boat shouted down, "It's the luck of the Irish. The last time we were out, we saw no sharks the last 5 days." And as he was speaking, he said, "Oh, get down, there's another one coming." Well, we all took a deep breath. We all ducked down and out of the water. Here comes another. And it came right towards us, smaller this time, thinner. It came right up and turned sideways on again as it sensed the steel cage and moved away. We saw in total 5 different great whites that came up and inspected us, and then with a flick of their tail disappeared. So what is it like to encounter this legendary sea creature that was made monsterized by Jaws, one of the most popular films of the last century? Well, I would say that there's a quiet majesty about them. They do have these large, rather dead eyes. Now, they're obviously not dead because they're alive and kicking, literally. But there's something there doesn't seem to be a soul behind this. Maybe this is me being anthropomorphic. Maybe I've watched too many Pixar movies. You expect the animals to start talking like Will Smith and singing songs, but this certainly didn't happen. There's a certain deadness, there's a certain coldness, and they are there to live like we all do by killing prey, eating and mating. But there was something about the quality of being in the water with them. When you stripped everything else away, they were magnificent, is all I can say. Just so powerful, so silent, so sleek. As you duck into these cold waters, the waters are quite clear, so you see them coming out of the murk. They then, with the very smallest flick of their tail and fin, they maneuver around you. You can see how adept they are, how quick, how intelligent, how bright they are. And then off they go. So we were dragged out of the water. More people took our places. Me, having the luck of the Irish, stood on deck taking a lot of plaudits, I'd have to say. Nothing wrong with that. It was very enjoyable. I was trying to keep the contents of my tummy down and was shivering with the cold at this stage, so the journey back was very welcome. It took me a couple of hours to get my land legs back underneath me. I met the photographer who was with me, Barbara, who sort of dried me down and dusted me off, and we had a drink, a little rum that settled the tummy, and reflected with the other members of the crew and the other people who'd been on the trip and discussed the efficacy and the what for. And the general opinion was, this is definitely worth doing once. Would I recommend you go out and face a great white shark, one of these topical moments in your life? Yes. Make sure that the provider is certified, that all the safety is followed, because people have been killed going cage shark diving. Once you've ticked all those boxes, once you've taken your sequels the night before, I think it could be a very interesting experience. I certainly loved, and will always remember the great white and those big black eyes looking at me, dead on, and then disappearing. What they thought I'll never know, but I think it would be something that if the cage wasn't there, I would certainly be scrambling on deck, because they had the intent look of the predator chasing down the prey. So it's a gutsy experience that really, again, gives you an insight into something that we usually only see in movies. So go, get on a plane, go to South Africa, go on the garden route, visit Hermanus, watch the whales, and then, if you dare, go out early morning, immerse yourself in the cold water, and look out and see if you too can watch and meet the dead eyes of a great white shark.